Hey, it's your boy Justin, J.Varizzle the Fisher. And today we're out here talking about baitcasters. So if you're anything like me, like I've been fishing since I could walk, but everybody pretty much starts out very similar. You start out with that Zebco push button, click, toss, let the button out on the release, probably bobber and a night crawler catching you some brim, right? And then we move up and eventually we learn how to use a spinning rod, and that's primarily what we're going to use most of the time, right? And back when I was probably in my teenage years, my dad started using a baitcaster because we would bass fish a lot. And I'm gonna tell you, I was scared of it. I was intimidated by it. I had no idea how to use it. And a lot of people are intimidated by the baitcaster. They're just unsure, how to use their thumb and all the other stuff, just the horror stories of the wicked birdsnests and Backlash. And so it took me a long time to even try to use one. But a few years ago, a friend of mine was like, dude, it's not that hard. It's all about tuning the reel, making sure your weight and line distribution is right. And a lot of the modern day baitcasters, as opposed to what, my dad was using back in like the late 90s, they've come a long way with their technology. I mean, you've got a tuning knob, you've got a brake system, it's all magnetic brake. And I'm not saying you're not gonna backlash, just go into it knowing that you are. And I think that's one thing you need to keep in your mind is, I'm gonna backlash. But I also have a video from a while back that shows you how to deal with that. I purposely backlashed the crap out of a reel baitcaster just so I could show people that it's not really that, because some people, they backlash and they're like, oh man, I gotta cut the line out and everything. No, you don't. It might take some time. You're gonna have to work it and try to find where that hang up is inside the reel, but you can do it. You can get it out, and I've proven that. I showed that on an earlier video. So I wanted to kind of take a moment, since I'm not out saltwater fishing today, or I got the pond behind me obviously, but more for demonstration purposes. I'm not doing any serious fishing today. If I catch a fish, great, but this is more of a letting you know about baitcasters. And if you're in that position where you're like, man, I don't know enough about it, but I really want to try it, hopefully this video will give you some confidence, right? I've got 3 different baitcasters that I brought with me, right? 3 different reels. So we've got a 13 Fishing. This is the Origin 1 Blackout from 13 Fishing. All of these are very inexpensive baitcasters. You don't have to go out there and buy anything super expensive, right? So that's one brand. Another one that we have is the Quantum Smoke. This is a little bit more of a higher end. The braking system's a little bit different, and I'm not sure what the gear ratio is on this one, but 7 to 3 to 1, 9 braking. So it's a good reel. I've got it set up on what I use primarily for jigging and popping and frogging. So you'll see a little bit of a different reaction with this one than you will the other two. This has got braid on it because I'm using this a lot of times in structure. My other two are simply all spooled with 12-pound fluorocarbon line, right? I use a lot of fluorocarbon. I like it. I like the way it reacts. I've got a better hookup ratio with it. I'll use braid for what I need to. And sometimes I'll use mono, but it's very rare. Normally I'm either braid or fluoro, right? My last setup that I have is actually the first baitcaster that I ever got. And this is the Kastking Resolute. And it's got a 6 to 6 to 1 gear ratio. This is literally what I learned on, right? And this combo was not expensive. This is now set up on a 13 Fishing rod. This is the 13 Fishing Fate Black rod. This is not the original rod that I had this reel on because I actually broke the Kastking reel. But the rod that I had this on, it was a rod reel combo that I got at Academy Sports, and it was $99.99. So $100 investment in my first baitcaster setup. And this is the one that I'm gonna kind of walk you through what I'm talking about when we talk about baitcasters, right? One thing you want to keep in mind, when you're using a baitcaster, you're primarily going to be using heavy lures, especially when you first start out. I'm not saying you always have to use heavy lures. As you get better with it, you can kind of finesse it a lot more. You can use these to skip better than a spinning reel. A lot of times if you want to like skip under a dock or under some cover, some structure, a lot of times these work the best for that, right? But we're gonna kind of break it down to its basics, and if everything goes the way that I hope it goes, I will show you that it's not that difficult, especially with these modern day reels, and you shouldn't be scared of it. I'm not saying it's not gonna take practice, because it will, you know, to get really good at it. But start out with a heavy lure. I've got a Texas rig. I think this is a 1/4 ounce weight on this one. Texas rig, just a Senko style worm, right? Weedless rigged, and that's going to be what we start out with. Now I've got different things on each one of these, you know, so as I'm showing this, keep in mind that you probably want to keep, you know, when you're first starting out, you want to keep similar weight of the bait, you know, of your lure, so you can, you know, gauge it and gain practice with it, right? I make sure that you tune your bait caster, so I'm gonna hold this thing out and I'm just gonna kind of click the button, and this one's probably pretty well tuned. Hold the line with my thumb, and if I let off the line, that bait should fall at a pretty steady rate, right? Not overly fast, but what you want to do to start this thing out, right? I'll reel my lure up. This right here is your tuning reel, or your tuning knob, okay? Flip side is your brake. Those are both very important when you deal with bait casters, right? So your tuning reel, what I do to start out is I'll tune this sucker as tight as I possibly can, right? So going that way, right? Different bait casters react different. Know your reel. Your drag is right here, just so y'all know. And then, so when I click this button and I let off, this bait is not gonna move, right? It's gonna stay right in place. Look at that. I got the button declicked. I can shake it and it's not gonna go anywhere. So what you do now that you've got that, this tuning reel, and back off slowly until you see that bait start to drop. And that relieves that pressure, that front end tension on the line. Now that I can see it dropping, I just let it drop to the ground, and you can see it didn't backlash on me just by doing that. So our next step, now that we've got it pretty well tuned, I'm gonna double check that one more time. Just reel it up, button, and then you'll see how fast it falls, right? Slow, steady drop. Now I can speed that up if I want to. It depends on what conditions I'm dealing with. I got a little bit of wind today, not too bad. The other thing to think about when we talk about bait casters, the other component is your braking system, all right? So you see this knob right here? This is your brake on the opposite side of the reel. And if you're just starting out with a bait caster, this is the first time you've ever messed with it, you'll see these numbers, and this one goes all the way up to 10 or max, right? I got it set at 8 right now, but I'm gonna go ahead and crank that up pretty much as high as I can go. That's gonna be that back end brake. So this braking system, what it does with the magnetic brake that it has, at the end of the cast, when the line is all the way as far out as it's gonna go, it senses that tension, right? And it's gonna stop your lure from going any further. And when it does, it's like putting the brakes on, and then your lure is gonna drop, right? So by tuning it properly, I might back down on that a little bit, just a smidge. Tuning it properly, turn the brake all the way up, and I'm actually gonna back down the brake because I've got it set on 10 right now, and I'm gonna back it down maybe to a 9 or a 10 or 9.5, just because I don't want all that. When the brake, you're not gonna be able to get as long a cast until you get better with this thing, and you can back down on that dial, on that brake, and use your thumb more to control your line. That's when you're gonna get better and get your longer cast in. But when you're first learning, that's all you need to know. Tune it, turn the brake up as high as you can stand it without backlashing, right? So it's tuned. I've got it up to a 9.5 right now. I've got my Texas rig, pretty, you know, 1/4 ounce, pretty heavy lure, right? So if this all goes to plan, hopefully this will not backlash. For this, I'm gonna be doing kind of like a whip cast on it. And that's what I recommend to start out with, like either whip or a sidearm. Don't try to overhead cast this thing, because that's going to be your most prone aspect to backlashing or bird's nesting this thing. Is it'll get caught up from here to here, and you'll end up plunging the lure, and then that line just continues to spool because that break can't keep up with it. But let's see what we got, right? Look at that. I didn't touch it with my thumb at all. Didn't touch it. Everybody always said, you know, growing up, well, you got to be able to work your thumb on that Baitcaster. I don't know if you saw how far that went. See if I can kind of angle this. You can kind of see my line out there. But, I mean, that was a decent cast, even with the break all the way up. So, this Texas rig is, I know it's weedless, but it's probably going to get caught up in these grass, because this pond has so much grass in it. You can see how much I'm reeling back in, right? Like, that was a decent cast for having the break all the way up at a 9.5. I've got it tuned well, and it didn't backlash at all. I didn't touch it with my thumb. You guys saw it. I'll do it again. Not a backlash at all. Never touched it with my thumb. That's how simple a baitcaster is if you know the mechanics of it. Make sure you get a decent cheap reel to start out with, right? You don't have to go spend thousands of dollars on these things, especially when you're first starting out. But you can see how much I'm reeling right now, right? Started out with a heavy lure, 1/4 ounce weight, Senko worm, Texas rig style, break up to a 9.5. No worries, no backlash, nothing. So I'm gonna put this one down. I'm gonna grab my 13 fishing, all right? Just like before. Get my camera situated here a little bit better, all right? So again, I wanna check my tune, right? Every baitcaster is pretty much the same. You got a tuning and you got a break. Front end tension, back end tension. Make sense? My tune's pretty good on this one. I don't need to really make an adjustment. On this one, I've got my break set up to a 9, right? Different reel. So this is 13 fishing, Origin Blackout, as opposed to that Kastking Resolute. And I'll do the same thing with this one that I did with that one, and we'll see what happens. Again, this is 12-pound fluorocarbon line, right? So I'll take my bluegill swim bait, which is, I guess, similar in weight to the Texas rig, but maybe this one might be actually a little bit heavier. But I'll take this and I'll whip it, and we'll see if we'll backlash, right? Look at that. No backlash, didn't use a thumb, nothing, right? Not that scary. And you can see that it casted pretty much the same distance, maybe a little bit further. I love this reel, by the way. I'm not sponsored by anybody, but for the price, and you can't, it's hard to beat 13 fishing equipment. You know, this is on the Omen Black rod. It's a 7.3 extra fast, medium heavy. And this reel, this Origin Blackout, it's got a 7-to-3-to-1 gear ratio, and it just whips it out there. We'll reel our bluegill swim bait in, and I guarantee you it'll be covered in grass, even though it's weedless. Told you. I hope you guys are seeing, though, that it's not that difficult to cast these bait casters. It's not the myth that you've heard a lot, you know, that it's so difficult to do. This day and age, with the technology, like I said, it's not that bad. So if you're apprehensive, if you're a little nervous about getting into the bait caster, go buy something similar to what I just showed you for a very reasonable price. And I mean, you can get out here and practice, go find a neighborhood pond or practice in your yard until you get better. Just put a weight, no hook, and practice your cast, right? So the third reel that we're gonna test here is this Quantum Smoke X, right? Quantum Smoke X, and on this, let me be fair, all right? The lure that I'm using on this rod and reel setup is not as heavy as the two that we just threw. And I'm using, I think, 15-pound braid, right? So I'm using a much stouter line, and my lure is not as heavy. I might backlash this one, I'm not gonna lie, you know, I might do it. But it's the same concept, same principle. So let me get my lure out here, right? I got a popper on this thing, right? By the way, I did this just to try to see the difference, because as you can see with my other Baitcasters, it was right-hand reel, right? But when I use a spinning reel, I'm right-handed. When I use a spinning reel, I'm always reeling in with my left hand. So I said, why not try a left-hand reel on a Baitcaster? Because typically, you know, if you're right-handed, you're gonna have a right-hand reel Baitcaster. But I wanted to try something different. Hindsight is 20/20, right? I don't recommend it. It's a little awkward trying to switch to your left hand to reel with one of these. It's a lot easier to just go right into reeling with your right hand. I didn't realize this. Learn from my mistakes, or try it for yourself and see if you like it. You might be the type of person that you gotta have that left hand reel because you're so used to those spinning rods, and that's fine. But we'll check our tune, all right? Button pushed, I'll let my thumb off, and we'll see the drop, all right? So I'll try to do it where the camera can see it. Button, hold it out steady, steady drop, right? So we know our tune is pretty good. I've got this brake set up to an 8 right now. So it's pretty stout, but not all the way to a 10, because this one will go all the way to a 10. So let's just see what happens with our braided line, our Smoke X Quantum reel. We'll test this as in opposition to the other two that we just tested. Not gonna go as far because I'm using braided line, and like I said, the lure is not as heavy. But you can see I did the same thing, didn't use my thumb at all, no backlash. Baitcasters are not as scary as people think they are. And I'll be the first to tell you, I was terrified of them. I absolutely was like, I will bird's nest it, I will backlash it. You know, I'm not gonna be any good with it. And of course, we got a helicopter flying over right now, which is messing up my audio. Gotta love it, right? All right, take a break. All right, so you got to see all three of the reels that I brought out, these Baitcasters, and we kind of did a little bit of comparison. It really wasn't fair for that Quantum Smoke because the difference in the lure and the type of line. So I'm pretty confident that that thing will perform just as well as the other two. I'm gonna play around a little bit with my my favorite one of the three, the 13 Fishing, the Origin Blackout, and we're gonna toss this little bluegill swim bait around a little bit and just see if we can't hook up to something. Again, a lot of grass in here, so. All right, I'm gonna try a little bit of an overhand cast and just kind of put it straight out so you can see kind of what that looks like. This, when you're doing overhand, you do kind of have to be careful with it. Like I said, if you don't release at the right time, your lure's just gonna go kerplunk in the drink. And then when that happens, the reel's not gonna be able to catch up to it. And that's when you're gonna get that backlash, right? Also, if there's a lot of wind, which I'm pretty good right now, if there was a lot of wind, I really wouldn't recommend throwing it high up in the air, right? So overhand cast, no backlash. I'm gonna slow reel this bluegill swim bait, kind of slow reel it and stop. It wasn't exactly the cast that I wanted. But it was a cast and it got it out there. Now let's try that. Sometimes I like to hold it to the side a little bit when I do an overhand cast. And there you have where I just messed up, right? So there's an example of me trying to do a little too much with it. And you really don't need to put that much on it. But as you can see how I'm fixing this, right? I'm just slowly pulling this line out. And yeah, it's gonna feed a whole lot of line, but that might be what you have to do in order to get it to where you can straighten this thing out. Some people would look at that and be like, oh man, we gotta cut that. No, you don't have to cut it. Just be easy with it and keep pulling line out slowly. And you may have to go in to actually pick line out a little bit till you can find the loop that it's hung up on. But as you can see, just by slowly pulling this line out, look at that, I'm pretty much straight now. I can lock it, hold my fingers so I got tension on the line, reel it back in, and all is fine. Yet another reason not to really be intimidated by these things, because you can fix your mistakes. It's not a big deal. I didn't plan that, but it was a good demonstration. Like a mile long. Well, the fish aren't really cooperating today. They don't want to bite, not on what I'm throwing anyway. Had a ton of rain over the last day, like all day long pretty much. Didn't even clear up until late this afternoon. So I don't know, that might have something to do with it. Water temps might have something to do with it. You know, it's been in the 90s. I'm not even gonna try to throw top water right now because I really don't think that's gonna work for probably maybe another hour, and I don't have enough time to stick around and try it. But I just wanted you guys to see baitcasters, and that they're not as intimidating as people make them out to be, and that you can learn how to throw a baitcaster, and they definitely have their place in your fishing repertoire, you know, especially if you're a bass fisherman. You know, I mean, I take these out and use them with top water for reds, you know, in the intercoastal or in the saltwater creeks or brackish creeks. So you can use them for a variety of different things. Just keep in mind the weight of the lure that you use plays into it, the type of line and how heavy that is, and make sure you understand your baitcaster mechanism as far as your tuning knob and your brake. And when you're a beginner and just starting out, make sure that thing is tuned, and then turn your brake up as high as reasonable for you at that particular stage. And as you get better, you can back that brake down a little bit, work that thumb a little bit better as you get more in tune to it, because it comes natural, it really does. You can see on some of them casts, I was using my thumb as a thumb brake, and I wasn't even thinking about it. It's just what I've been trained to do. But when I first started out, it was hard trying to work a thumb, so just mess with that brake. And as you saw on several casts, I put it out there fairly far, even with the brake turned up to like a 9, and no backlash, not even using the thumb, no backlash. And I showed you when I did backlash why I did it, and that it wasn't that difficult to get that backlash out. It's really not hard. So thanks for watching, y'all. I appreciate it. Again, I have another video about backlashes and how to get those out. And I went to the creek down there, a little far away from, just a little bit from where we are, and I purposely backlashed the crap out of this Kastking reel, and I was able to get it out with no problem. So it's not the end of the world if you do. Just takes a second to get it worked out. Going for that 1,000 subscribers this year. I think I'm at 665 right now. So if you guys are into this content, if you like either these instructional videos or fishing videos or hunting videos, DIY stuff, consider giving me a subscribe. Hit the notification bell if you want to get updated on any time I post. And, you know, like the video, drop me a comment. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. If you more experienced fishermen have different